I recently saw this. Does the average American have enough to retire? And according to this right here, Empire Financial Services personal dashboard data, the average retirement savings balance was $492,795 as of January 17th, 2025. Notice what they say. This is a big number for sure, but is likely not going to be enough to live comfortably in retirement. Now, there's all kinds of different studies out there at different ages. I saw this one. The average balance for a 55 to 64-year-old was 537,560, but the median was only 185,000, which is kind of tragic. But I'm going to go ahead and run the numbers here. I want to go with this statement right here. This is a big number, but surely likely not going to be enough. So we're going to do 492,795, and we're going to plug this into a spreadsheet that we've created. 492,795. That's the beginning balance. Now, the key question that we have to ask is they say there's not going to be enough to live comfortably in retirement. What does it mean to live comfortably in retirement? Again, that's the key point. What are your expenses going to be? I'm going to go ahead and run it at $4,000 a month just to give us a starting number. So $4,000 a month would be $48,000 a year. Now, initially, you see that's a 9.74% withdrawal rate, but we haven't taken into account Social Security. So I went to the internet and I said, what's the average Social Security payment for somebody age 62? And they said it was $1,275 a month. So if you're planning on $4,000 a month, you don't need to take $4,000 a month out of your nest egg. You only have to take $22,725. So now we're down to a 6.64% withdrawal rate, which is still quite a bit above the 4% rule. But how often would we have a problem with that? Using numbers for the last 100 years, which is what we do on this channel. We use all these different returns for the last 100 years, and we just see where somebody might be. So we're going to do that. We're going to do a 3% COLA. In other words, Social Security gives you a COLA. We're also going to have a COLA on what you're taking out from your nest egg. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But we're going to go ahead and update this, and we're going to see how many times you run out of money in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years over the last 100 years during each of these time periods. Looks like this right here shows us how many times you run out of money in 20 years. 11% of the time. You can see it right there. After 10 years, we just ran out of money. If we use the 1929 and 1930 numbers, which a lot of people say don't even bother looking at the Depression years because it's never going to happen again, but I like to include these. Over a 20-year period, you've got an 11% failure rate, 88.9% success rate, and over a 30-year period, you have a 15% failure rate. Let's look at the 20-year graph, though. Again, we're going to see the Depression years, obviously, but I want you to notice we also have a problem using the decades of the 2000s. We also have, look at these numbers, folks. How many times remember you're starting out with just under $500,000. This is $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. So again, all depends on what's happening those initial years when you retire. If we go here and show you the 2000 numbers, right down through here. Let's just start 1995. 1995. This is a summary box of what you would have after each of these time periods. No problem. Look at that. We'd have this is withdrawing $4,000 a month, increasing that by 3% a year, taking into account inflation. Social Security. 1995, no problem. 1996, this summary box right here. Watch what happens if we get farther down. 1997. We use 1998 numbers. Now you're actually running out of money, or you're down to $67,000 after 20 years. Why? Because sequence of returns risk. These initial years, if those are your initial years after retirement, are down years that can really affect it. So how does it affect it? 11% of the time in the last 100 years, you'd run out of money if you had these down years initially. So what do we do differently? People recommend after positive years, because of this graph right here, you want to take out more money because you don't want to be having $1 million, $2 million after 20 years of retirement. You want to be able to enjoy that money while you're still young. So some people have come up with this plan. We're going to just show you what those numbers run. In other words, after positive years, the next year you increase your amount you're taking out by 5%. But in down years, I'm going to go ahead and change this to Down years, in other words, after the year 2000, after we had a down year, you take 2.5% less out. So you can see that dropping from $3,004 a month down to 29, and so on. And you run the numbers for that. Right now we got 11% failure rate, but most of the time you'd be so well off. Don't you want to take out more in those earlier years so you can enjoy it in retirement? Let's see how that the numbers might work out. Okay, now we got a little bit more times that you'd actually run out of money using this scenario, 20% of the time. Why? Because you're taking out 5% more in the good years. In the down years, you're taking out 2.5% less, so that's a 7.5% split. The down years, you wouldn't have to lose so much. Now, we could change that, but let's just look at the graph for a minute. 20% failure rate, got the normal depression type years. You got around the years late 60s, because in the late 60s, we also had some down years that could happen. But especially we have recently in 25 years ago, we had this down decade. So now we're having an issue during the depression years, around the year 73 and 74, and also in 2000. But again, you've got all this money most of the time. How much percent of the time? 80% of the time after 20 years, 71% of the time after 30 years. What we also do on this channel is assume that those first decade is probably your go-go years. Second decade, you're probably going to cut back on your expenditure a little bit, so we allow for that here. The second decade, you're going to drop 10% because you're not going to be spending near as much. And then in the third decade, they call those the no-go years. So you got the go-go years right here, the slow-go years, the second decade. We just like to take into account all different possibilities. So we got a 20% situation here where you might be running out of money. But again, many times, again, it depends on what comfort level you're at for the success level. Let's do one more thing here. We're assuming $4,000 a month, which is a 6.64% withdrawal rate on this amount. What happens if we go down to maybe 3,800? That'd be a 6.15. I'm trying to get below 6%. Okay, let's do 3,000. Let's actually go to 3,500. That's 5.42%. Notice how much the numbers are going to change. Just taking $500 less a month out. Again, I don't know what your living comfortably in retirement means, but if we do 3,500 a month, that'd be 42,000 a year. That's a 5.42%. Let's go ahead and update this and see how much this 20% changes. It's like it made a huge difference, folks, going from $400 a month to $3,500 a month. Now we just have a 7% failure rate. Here's the graph. Depression years, a little bit around the year 2000. Look at all these other years. If you start out with some really good years, go ahead and increase this so you're not taking out 35. I'm going to go ahead and increase that. Maybe instead of 5%, maybe increase it 10% as long as you have some good years. But I just wanted to run the numbers here. This statement right here that is likely not going to be enough for retirement. We saw that if we stuck with the $4,000 a year, we had an issue what was failing 20% of the time if we did these criteria. But we can change any of these criteria. But again, to make a blanket statement like this, it's probably not going to be enough. That's not necessarily true, but it all depends on what your expected expenditures are going to be. $4,000 a month on this amount right here would be a 6.64% withdrawal rate. That's quite a bit above the 4% withdrawal rate. You go down to this one, and we saw we only had a 7% failure rate, and most of them were during the depression years, and then a little bit around the year 2000. So you really need to monitor what's going on in those initial years, and then withdraw accordingly or increase accordingly depending on what happened in the previous year. But folks, that's what we do on this channel. We love running the numbers for people. We run them for everybody. We run them for the young adult who's first starting out, because we got spreadsheets for that. We got them for the middle-aged persons who's trying to catch up. We got spreadsheets for that. And in this video, we're looking at somebody, a retiree who wants to know how much they can safely withdraw and have this money last. And folks, like I say, I've developed this channel to help most everyone. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just someone who loves numbers and wants to help people see the awesome power of compounding and just see what numbers can do for you. In this case, we saw that most cases you're going to be just fine. If you're comfortable with an 80% success rate, as we ran that, but that's kind of high for a 6.64%. Now, what happened if we actually change the number to 537,560? That would change all these numbers again. But I also want you to notice this median balance is kind of tragic because 185,000. This isn't going to be enough. This definitely isn't going to be enough. But again, that's what we do on this channel. We love running numbers for people. Um, we just use the actual historical returns as you're seeing, and we project out what some returns might do for you. Please consider subscribing. Please share. Please like these videos. Let people know there's a channel out there that run all kinds of different numbers, point out all kinds of different strategies that people have, and actually run the numbers to show them where they might be. Thanks for watching.